we dismiss that all of a sudden become big things. And I'm going to counter that saying about sweating the small stuff, that more times than not in life, in business, and in the scriptures and spiritually as well, many times those small things can have a very, very big impact and big meaning on us. Have you ever heard this saying, another saying that counters that don't sweat the small stuff is pay attention to the details. In business, that oftentimes means the difference between a successful person or company because of them paying attention to the smallest of details. I have no stock in this company. I'm not endorsing them in any way, but one company that has made a fortune doing this is Apple. Now, I do like their product. They have to me, they're a superior electronic and just about everything. And that's just my opinion. No skin in that game. I make no money off of them, but I sure give them a lot. But they paid attention to the detail. When Steve Jobs took back, he started that company. They threw him out, and then he came back to be the CEO years later, and they had like less than 3% of the market shares on computers. Well, he said, let's start paying attention to the details, the small things, the things that most companies could care less about. He started focusing on things like the packaging. I want it to be, and that was his words, I want it to be fun when people open the package. Now, what do you do with the box? You open it and you toss it aside and you throw it away. If you look at how many PCs are bundled, they're just in cardboard boxes. They're plain brown cardboard. Cables are just stuffed in everywhere. Well, that's not it. He wanted the opening of the product to be an experience. And now if you look at their stock, they're one of the most profitable companies in the entire world. And it was because of their attention to small details like that. An individual that pays attention to the minor details is usually a person that achieves success, because they're focused on those little things that others just gloss over. There was a book that was written many years ago by a Dr. Richard Carlson, and the title of that book was Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. It's all small stuff. Everything can become small or big stuff. Sweat and pay attention to everything. And when we do that, we'll see results. Well, how about spiritually? Let's shift that. We've been talking about things here on this earth. Let's shift it to spiritual. What are we paying attention to spiritually, or not paying attention to, that we just think is too small of a detail? Because like our physical life, like in business, those small things can have a very big impact and a very big difference. The Lord uses small things to teach us great lessons. In the book of Proverbs, chapter 30, and beginning in verse 24. Proverbs chapter 30, and beginning in verse 24. There are 4 things which are little on the earth, but they are exceedingly wise. The ants are a people not strong, yet they prepare their food in the summer. The rock badgers are a feeble folk, yet they make their homes in the crags. The locusts have no king, yet they all advance in ranks. The spider skillfully grasps with its hands, and it is in kings' palaces. Look at those 4 little animals that the scriptures use and tell us to look at, and what we can look and learn when we do look at them. An ant, how small they are. They're not strong individually, are they? We could step on them and squash them as we walk and not even realize it. Yet they all work together in unison and take great strength together, preparing for the winter. They prepare all summer long so they can survive the winter. That little insignificant ant, and look at how industrious they are. The rock badger, I think the King James says conies, They are a type of a rock rabbit, is what I looked at when I was studying this. Like an ant, a rabbit is not a huge animal. If you look at them in the wild, they don't have a lot rabbits aren't, well, they're known for one thing, but it's not fighting. And rabbits are not going to take on some prey and beat it up because of their strength. But the Proverbs here is saying, look at these little rabbits. The rock badger. They make their home inside, and why they get the name rock badger is because they live in those rocks. And if we see some of the photos and video that comes out of that area in the Middle East, those hard rocks and caves, our mountains, not that they're soft, but they're covered with dirt and trees, and these are just rocks, and that's where this little bitty tiny meek animal makes its home. Think about how strong that must make them, how tough they are. But we look at them as a little rabbit, just hopping around. And the only time people get mad at rabbits is if they have flowers or a garden that the rabbit is eating. But these animals, these little bitty things, are living in this area that is all but inhabitable. Not a place that we would consider comfortable or secure living at all. But that's where these little animals find home. Look at their fortitude and their toughness. I think we're getting ready to have another brood of these come out this summer, and that's the locust. If you remember a few years back, they came out in force, didn't they? They didn't have a leader calling them out, but they were everywhere. They're little bitty tiny critters, but boy, what a mess they make. They are all over everything. They wreak havoc everywhere, and it's so loud. That little bitty bug, it's probably not 2 or 3 inches long at the most. They are everywhere. How about that spider in your house? I mean, if you think about a spider, the size of one compared to your house, it's inconsequential, right? Not in our house. Yeah, I'll tell you what, when we get those spiders in our house, I don't know whether, when I hear the yell from the kitchen, whether I should be grabbing a paper towel or a fly swatter or a gun, because it's such a panicked scream. And if you really want to hear a panicked scream, wait until I try to get it and I miss it and the spider disappears in the house. That little bitty animal causes a very, very big problem. It becomes a big deal. But all 4 of these creatures, though they don't have brute strength, I mean, you would think that, I don't hear of too many deaths of people being eaten alive by spiders, but that's what we would think, wouldn't it? They don't have brute strength of a larger animal, like maybe a lion or a shark or something that would be a formidable opponent. But they are exceedingly wise and durable, and we can learn from them. We can take lessons from these small animals, that small things can be very large in their problems. Stronger animals have success because of their strength and the size advantage that they have over other animals. These little things survive. As the proverb said, the little spider can be found in king's palaces. We can take lessons from them. From a spiritual perspective, small things and small actions can be shown to make a very big difference. And we're going to look at a few of them this morning as we go along. The first is of the fruit of the tree. From Genesis chapter 3 and beginning in verse 1. Probably doesn't seem like a very big deal to us, does it? We pick a fruit off of a tree. If we walk by, say, an apple tree or some kind of fruiting tree, and we walk by it and we pick one off, well, one, you would never notice it because there would be hundreds and hundreds more on there. Not a big deal, is it? It's going to grow back. There'll be another one take its place. Something so small and so inconsequential in our minds. I'm just going to pick this one piece of fruit. But in this instance, it wasn't inconsequential, was it? It had very, very life altering, not only for Adam and Eve, but for us as well, consequences. Beginning in verse 1 here in Genesis chapter 3. Now the serpent was more cunning than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, Has God indeed said, You shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, We may eat the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, You shall not eat it, nor shall you touch it, lest you die. Then the serpent said to the woman, You will not surely die, for God knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. She also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. How many small things like that can get us into big trouble? This one fruit. Well, look at how good it is. Look at how desirable it is. God doesn't mean what he says about that. This all the other trees that we're allowed to eat of, and then here's this one that I can't. It doesn't matter. I'll just take it. I'll do this one small thing that I know is wrong. She knew it was wrong because she quoted what God had told her. I've read the scriptures. I know what God said. I know it's sinful, but it's so small. Does it really matter? Well, back in the Garden of Eden, it mattered to God, didn't it? God said not to eat of this fruit of this particular tree. You can eat from any other ones, but don't eat from this one. Does it really matter? Well, look at the consequences that we're still dealing with to this very day because of that decision. We're still separated from God because of that. We still face physical death because of that. And we face eternal punishment because of that. That one action brought sin into the world. There was neither sin nor death before the offense of Adam. After that, there were both. In Romans chapter 5 and in verse 12. Romans chapter 5, beginning in verse 12, and then we'll read verse 19. Therefore, just as through one man sin entered the world, and death through sin, and thus death spread to all men because all sinned. Yes, one man's decision. Think of the world that they were living in before they decided to disobey God. They didn't do something big, did they? I'm sure that in our minds, probably murdering somebody, which their son did later, but murdering somebody would be much worse than taking of a little piece of fruit. Well, God told them not to, and they sinned. In verse 19, For as by one man's disobedience many were made sinners, both spiritual and physical death came that day, so also by one man's obedience many will be made righteous. Spiritual and physical death came that one day. Adam's transgression caused both sin and death to enter into the world, but that wasn't a very big deal, was it? How big was that piece of fruit? It was huge. How many small sinful acts do we excuse ourselves of? And I would say that I can excuse the small sinful acts for me, but if I see you doing something that's different than what I do, well, that's bad. That's a big deal. But how many small sinful acts do we excuse ourselves of that we're involved in because it's just so small and so meaningless? Does it really matter? Well, that piece of fruit to Adam and Eve separated them from God with their disobedience. That sin for us separates us from God today. Just like them taking of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Yes, they didn't die immediately, but they brought in physical and spiritual death when they did that. Now, how about something as small as fire? But the Lord called it strange fire. In Leviticus chapter 10, beginning in verse 1. Leviticus chapter 10, beginning in verse 1. Then Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, each took his censer and put fire in it, put incense on it, and offered profane fire before the Lord, which he had not commanded them. So fire went out from the Lord and devoured them, and they died before the Lord. What did they needed to light the altar or the incense or whatever they were doing? Well, they did it in a way that was not commanded by them, by the Lord to them. Think about how small of a spark it takes to light a fire. We occasionally will have a little fire in our backyard, and by the end, depending on how wet the wood is, sometimes it takes it a little bit more to light, but by the end, the fire that we have going is much bigger than whatever I lit it with, usually with my blowtorch, but the flame's pretty small compared to the fire at the end. Does it matter how it's burning? What difference does it make whether I used a lighter or a torch or I rub two sticks together? That's our attitude, isn't it? We got fire. What difference does it make? How small the starter is compared to the end result. But that's not how God sees it, is it? When it's part of a command that He told them to do. Whatever it was, they didn't do it the way that God had told them to. Nadab and Abihu started that fire. But they brought, as the King James says, strange fire. In some way, the Lord had told them not to do it. And that's what they did. And what is strange fire? Well, I don't know, but it's started in a way that God doesn't want it to be started. Now, how many things involving, and this would have been part of their worship service, how many things involving our worship could we classify as a small thing in our minds? Maybe how we sing. Maybe adding something to it to help it improve, to fill the sound. These cutouts were for pianos. This goes back before my time, but some may remember that's what was sitting there. Well, that would help our singing greatly. Boy, that'd sound good with the new ceiling. I mean, we could have the rafters vibrating here. Is that how the Lord has commanded us in the examples that we have in our singing to Him? I'd be offering profane fire, wouldn't it? What about raising funds for the church? We have a pretty clear way, we looked at it this morning in our Bible study, about how the church collects its funds. We could collect more. Let's use man's wisdom here. Well, on the first day of the week, we all can't be here, and we don't get any funds from those outside that are in the community. What if we had a rummage or a bake sale or a carnival? Oh, we could do a lot of good with that money, couldn't we? And we could bring that money and we could offer it to the Lord. Well, that would be collecting funds in a way that the Scriptures don't authorize us to do them in. That would be profane fire. The same would be said as spending money that belongs to the church. There are many ways and causes that we could support, that would do good. We can't argue the fact that they do good. Well, things like orphanages or halfway houses or homeless shelters. There's a huge problem with homelessness. Well, we could open up the doors and fund a homeless shelter or have one in our basement. We've got open rooms down there. We could bring them in here. Where are the Scriptures to support and authorize us spending the Lord's money doing that? Are we doing good? Yes. But there's no authority. That would be the equivalent of whatever Nadab and Abihu did with their fire. They offered strange fire at the altar of the Lord. It's something that God has not told us to do. If He wanted us to do that, He would have given us instructions on how to do it and how to carry out. Now, as an individual, can I support these things? Well, I would say yes. And if it's something that is not benefiting and supporting another religious cause, I would say it's something we should be supporting and helping. We're told, individually, we're told to help those in need. But that's not where the Lord's money, the church's money, is to be spent. We have very strict limitations on how it is spent. That's offering profane fire. Look at Nadab and Abihu got the fire, didn't they? But it was strange fire. And it cost them their life. Now, God's not going to send fire down and burn us up today for disobeying Him, but it will cost us our soul eternally. Not only strange fire in our worship service, but as I was working on this yesterday, I stomped all over my feet when I thought about this. What about the fires that we can start with that little thing in our mouth, the tongue? It's not going to light a physical fire, but that tongue can set some things on fire too, can't it? Some strange fire can come out of it. In James chapter 3, and beginning in verse 5. James chapter 3 and verse 5. Couldn't that fire come from our speech? Maybe not even our verbal speech, but our nonverbal communication as well. In verse 5 here, he says, even so the tongue is a little member and boasts great things. See how great a forest a little fire kindles. And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. The tongue is so set among our members that it defiles the whole body and sets on fire the course of nature and is set on fire by hell. For every kind of beast and bird, of reptile and creature of the sea is tamed and has been tamed by mankind. But no man can tame the tongue. It is an unruly evil full of deadly poison. Like that spider in our house in comparison to the size, think about the comparison of the tongue to the size of the rest of our body. It's pretty small in size-wise compared to the rest of our body. But what a large fire it can spark. And it can kindle and it can keep growing because it's not tamed. The authorities, I think yesterday or day before I saw on the news, the authorities arrested some teenager in New Jersey that had sparked all those wildfires that they're dealing with. I don't think all of them are out or contained even, but he had set a bonfire of some sort and left it unattended. And it went out of control and it burned thousands upon thousands of acres. And I still don't think it's 100% contained. I could be wrong because I was doing other things while that story was on. But our tongue is the same way. Our speech, our communication can start that wildfire. It burns out of control. Some small word that we have spoken or comment that we have made in no more than passing. Without even thinking. How often do we do that? All the time. Something so small that we may not even remember saying it. I've had that experience. Well, you said this. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. If it's up here, I can go back and listen to the proof, and usually I have. But things that we don't even remember. What a big problem that can create. A little thing like the tongue. Another perfect example of that would be looking at the action of Moses when he smote the rock in Numbers chapter 20 and beginning in verse 7. Moses wasn't told to hit the rock that time to bring water out. He was told to speak to it. But Moses let his temper and eventually his tongue get the best of him. In Numbers chapter 20 and beginning in verse 7, Numbers chapter 20 and beginning in verse 7, then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, take your rod, you and your brother Aaron, gather the congregation together, speak to the rock before their eyes, and it will yield its water. Thus you shall bring water for them out of the rock, and give drink to the congregation and their animals. So Moses took the rod from before the Lord, and he commanded as he commanded him, and Moses strikes the rock. In verse 10, and Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together before the rock, and he said to them, Hear now, you rebels, must we bring water for you out of this rock? Then Moses lifted his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod, and water came out abundantly, and the congregation and their animals drank. Then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, Because you did not believe me to hallow me in the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly to the land which I have given you. Now remember, the last time that this happened, Moses was told to strike the rock. But this time God told him to speak to the rock. Well, what difference does it make? We could ask the same thing with the fire. What difference does it make? Fire is fire, right? Well, Moses got water out of the rock. What difference does it make? Well, that made a big difference, didn't it? And instead of speaking to it and giving God the credit for it like he was commanded to do, he struck it and he took the credit for himself. Must we bring water for you out of this? He and Aaron did not have the power to do that in any way. Must we bring the water for you? And what did it cost him? What did that little mistake cost him? Well, his entrance into the promised land. You will not bring the people in. You cannot enter this land that you have been working and journeying towards. Something in our eyes that may be so small. Look at how aggravated he was, and something that we would easily excuse in our mind. Look at how aggravated he was. Look at how stressful these people were on him. What they had aggravated him with and worried him with and complained about. They must have been driving him nuts. These people, he was probably just upset and angry. Wouldn't we have been? I know I would have been. I've been told I have a short fuse sometimes. But we try to justify the mistakes that we make while we're upset. Well, I was upset when I did that. I was upset when I said that. Clearly, Moses did what he did out of anger towards the people and aggravation. Do we ever say something in anger? Oh, not me. Never. But that didn't release him from the very big consequences from his actions, did it? Immediately, God said, You're not going to bring the people into the promised land. You're going to get to look at it. You're going to go up into a mountain and oversee it, but you're not going to set foot on it. He did something that probably out of anger, something that we would consider very small in the grand scheme of things in our minds. But when he did that, he did not glorify God in it. He did not glorify him in that process as God had told him to do. And that because of that, he didn't get to set foot in the promised land. Just look at it. Imagine all the trials and the hardships that he had endured for years and years, and it to come crashing down because of that. Something so small in our mind. Those small things are pretty important when it comes to God, aren't they? I think this is a good spot to stop and pick up with this evening. We're going to look at a couple more small actions this evening, and then look at some small words, and then some small things that were used for big results in the Scriptures this evening that made a very big difference. If you're subject to the Lord's invitation in any way, take this time to think about the condition of your soul. And as every week seems like, as we finish one week, we realize and have examples of just how fragile life can be and how quickly it can change. Every week when we come together, we have a list of people that have problems and are struggling with life from health and other reasons, and probably things that were unexpected. And that's why we need to be prepared, because we don't know what tomorrow will bring. We don't know what is going to happen to us. And if we're living in a way that we're not prepared to stand before God in judgment, there may be something that happens to us that will prevent us from getting prepared. So that's why Jesus tells us to be ready and to watch and be prepared. because no one knows when that day is going to come. So if you're subject to the Lord's invitation in any way, take this time and think about the condition of your soul and make changes now while we have the opportunity as we stand and sing.